Good morning. I'm glad you're here. Prayer. I know when you're sitting there. But Colossians chapter 1 today. Colossians. So, whenever we start a new year, there's an idea here brings new hope, new ideas, often fresh stuff. And while this is always done wise, so how do we Christians? Well, it doesn't come from what I share here. Not like politics, ultimately trying to force our will upon that new that not going effective. Rather, for comes from making effort to grow in our knowledge and understanding. Today, will is a rendering our lives, transform our way of thinking, living. But if we do not surrender fully to Christ, it comes to a point where we have to start praying. Colossians 15. He is the image of God. Image of the invisible God, firstborn of all creatures. This is a proof by some to say that Jesus is the creator. That is not language. He's the first. He has preeminence as the firstborn over all creation. That explains why. For by him all things were things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. By him, all things are by him. Not simple. Verse 17, he is before all things, and in him all things. Head of the body, the church, beginning in the firstborn from not only all creation, also rise from the firstborn from the dead, that in everything might have. God was pleased to have all this him to reconcile all things, but powerful thing. Transform, kind of throw into our idea of what was a missionary found in South America. I once saw a lady digging through rubble. Husband and three, all she had, hiding in that all the dope. And our interpreter asked her what she was eating, like, well, bag of went into an area about where much to me. Started digging, effort, help her. Oh, it was like looking out to help. Found it. Really thanked us. Touched, thought through that as I tried to. Then I watched another quake victim holding her 3-year-old daughter, walking away from the last one in time, held out the card. Had to look at her response. I watched her walk away. Things got all messed up. Little list, certain important goals, things that mattered suddenly, bank accounts that that's with find funny how one ways. What are our one of there are a couple of things I'm not going to talk about are a gift. We are not doing Christians. We are not going to. That is not in the Word, not in prayer, not find godly. We're not going to go through that. That's a given. But what I am going to do, I want to talk to us about our prayer, God's church, and see how in these priorities as God's church, how that applies to our lives or in our walk. We want to look at the priorities. One of those first priorities that we priority is vital. And it's not just something that happens, but I want to from Revelation chapter event that takes place, event of worship. It's something that happens. Revelation, starting at verse, paints this around the throne for living. Day and night, they never stop saying, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty who was." And whenever these living creatures, glory and thanks to Him, throne lives forever and ever. 24 elders can fall down before Him who and worship Him lives forever and ever. They lay their crowns before they are worthy, glory, honor, and power for you did all things by your. This passage demonstrates that worship our response. They are in the presence of God. They That picture of those elders at the God, they're saying, God, give us our life. You are our God, rendering God. So worship is our response to God. It's our response to His holiness, our response to God's love, to generosity, sovereignty, and more. Worship is something that demonstrates our gratitude is and what He's done. Worship is focusing my attention on God. You know, we struggle and find ourselves falling. Had this picture. God sitting on His throne. These creatures singing out, "Holy, holy, holy." The 24 elders falling down before the morning. God was right there. How would that affected? He was sitting right here in front of you. When you see Him with your own eyes, see His amazing glory, you would recognize His power that have changed how. That's what I mean by how all in autopilot. Well, worship is about focus, distracted by, distracted by. When it comes to ask myself, God wants. What does God desire? What is it? Worshiping God as He 12th chapter. Therefore, we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken. Let us be thankful and worship God, accept reverence. God is gives us the reason why. One of the reasons of a kingdom, part of the kingdom. That kingdom cannot be shaken. God's kingdom lasts forever. For a part of it. And thankful. And in that thanksgiving, worship God, acceptably, reverence God. We're right here. That reverence would have a hard time. All know we don't. Being in His presence. Worship is an act of gratitude. Demonstrate. Romans 12 also. Therefore, I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, bodies are holy and pleasing to God, which do not conform any longer to the pattern of this by the renewed far more. Worship, faithful, represent faithful. It's also our own walk with what we do together. priorities. Other priority that we need, Matthew chapter 20, left the disciples. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them, Father. Discipleship has two: making new disciples, nurturing and growing already disciples. Making new disciples should be our priority. Allow me to ask you, how many people now understand, don't want it to be as, rather, what have I done? I didn't. It's not about how many went over. It may be a had an opportunity to have on. How do we respond? How do we respond back entity, back God's church, right of Christ? What about you? Someone would, how we let people right of Christ. I've had conversations. I actually, a friend of mine, like you just don't want to get up and you don't want to, by the way, you don't want to join a part of something. Take this faithful, just copping out. You're pretending like the church itself is something. Look, people up and there are churches that are not following God. Congregations, there are denominations that are not following God. We're still God's church. God's church still exists. While some of those are not places I would ever go, a lot that I would go. Someone says, I don't like organized religion. Quit chasing after that nonsense. Go someplace where the people are real, where they're searching for God, where they're God. It exists there. Do we defend God, defend the truth? Not that we have to defend God Himself, but speak to them. Old people have the opportunity about planting, making a disciple, about growing, helping us nurture the faith of helping one another be formed to the likeness of character, values, purposes. Do we lovingly our behavior not matching? Hold each other, bury our. We're called to make disciples, not other words. Other priority, that of ministry, serving others. Chapter 2 tells us we're God's work. We're created in Christ Jesus. Good works. God's prepared in advance. God has a plan. We're part of that plan. We're not put here, take up space, assume go along for the ride. Called to be involved. You're put here to serve God through others. Ministry about making yourself. One of the things that I so appreciate about Jesus allowed him to plan, often interrupted by. You started reading the Bible for a lot of people. If your gospels, something that gospels fresh, start taking note of how many times interruption, what he was he doing something else, and someone came along and interrupted. Most of miracles, not all, but most, Jesus fed 5,000 people. Remember what his purpose was doing before that happened? He was headed over to the northeast side of the Galilee to pray by himself. When they got over there, as they approached the shore, a multitude of people had run around the north side of the Galilee because they were chasing him down. They wanted to. It says when he saw the multitude, he had compassion on them. What he did is he performed a number of miracles and so on, and he began to teach. Well, it got to be about supper time. Find some, found just barely a little bit of food. Miraculously multiplied that 10,000. It wasn't until after that that he finally went up on the mountain to pray by himself. He had gone over there earlier in the day to do that. But his entire day was taken up with an interruption. And then in the evening, when he went up to pray, night, took a stroll across the Sea of Galilee. Woman, 12 years, out to touch Jesus, passing by. What was Jesus actually on his way to Jairus? Jairus had just interrupted what my daughter's sick, close to death. So he heading with Jairus to Jairus' home. And this woman touches him, stops, and he being interrupted by an interruption. A moment where he was a man with leprosy running up to him. That wasn't planned. He didn't go find the guy. I interrupted what man had paralyzed. As Jesus dig a hole down on him, interrupting what he's doing. Most of them, what he was in that moment, but he didn't see them as an saw them. Is that the way? See, our role as Christians start to be. How many lives were changed? Welcome to interruptions. Is that the way? Because much of ministry is about that. Not always something we interruptions happen. What do we do? Utilize them. Well, along with talk about these priorities, I also want to what it means to take Jesus. Because there are ways in which but they, how do you make this? So I read an article in the years and the title of the article, "Don't Put Jesus Captures Your." Here's a couple of things. I have one piece of advice for you. Start this. Don't put. Now, before you label me a heretic, let me explain. Personally, I love this town. But he goes on to point out something I'm going to show. When it comes to making Jesus one of those ways, then Jesus, then, then, my all of those. Even use an acrostic. AOY. How effective? How do out? How number one? How everything follows. What does it? Does that mean I ignore my family? I have this job. Do I that job and everybody's supposed to be doing? How do I put my job? My major problem with this approach is that it segregates a little like this. Got the Jesus section, marriage section, segregate. I don't know about you. Life really segregates. Those things are interesting. Here's a closer picture, but this is quite accurate. But all of these things, Jesus right in the middle, section with all of the things in our life about this that all struggle that we notice. Like sometimes that's how it's heard me say repeat. Become not about inviting Jesus come, come for people. In fact, in Matthew chapter 12, gives us greatest commandments. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, all your mind, and with all your spirit. Second commandment, like it, love your neighbor as yourself. But we see the priority concept right here for us to follow. But this isn't just rather permeate all areas, but we would call it Jesus in. Notice something. Hello behind. That's the Jesus is going to everything in my life is going, it's going to transform all of those relations, all of those things. There may be some things I remove from my life. There are going to be things that I never get rid of, but it's going to transform what I do with it. Jesus needs to be in all of those, Lord over all those things. Don't approach it. Most often approach it rather than back to Colossians. I want to read those verses. Is the image of the invisible God, the first over all creation. By him, all things. heaven, visible and invisible, whether thrones or all things by him, is before all things. In him all things, is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the head, that in everything might have. God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him. First, out to us his redeemed cross that reconciled all his priority of your life. Find your, not the concept, rather it's Jesus all, and how much more successful. Saw a pastor plays a man know what takes place in the same kind of about that something happens. A man who lived his life on permanent fast forward, FedEx executive, job was make sure that packages arrive on time. Part of the film, actually, Moscow, ratings of there because of missing deadline, said, "Let us not commit the sin of turning our back on time." As the film moves on during the Christmas holidays, all the way from help FedEx solve the problem in Malaysia, that you get to at his excessive preoccupation. Girlfriend does her best to accept the man. That tells you. Dashes to catch a best plane, makes an awkward marriage proposal. Being so consumed with time, he didn't stop to wait. He shouted out as he was leaving, "I'll be right back." Cargo plane crashes in a violent electrical and help of a rubber dinghy. He washed on uncharted, finds himself trapped in a box. Initially, he collects some of the boxes, find their way onto the island, expecting to deliver them, clinging to some part of his life. As the days stretch into, realizes that he'll never be rescued. Boxes and desperate for talking to a volleyball. In the end, only the hope of all of these. That was his experience. Christ comes into that, what you value, what's important to you. A lot of times, not be value doesn't demonstrate. Well, as we close things, I don't know if you've ever hired home caught fire at the time. Here, upper window. Fireman put the ladder up and said, come down, hurry up, come down. To their amazement, fell down. I need to get dressed first. No, no, no. Come down now. Come about it. Come down now. No one can explain why the man's priorities led to his young man is represented. A great many managed to get out of line. Literally all kinds of unimportant jobs, worshiping self, or the wrong priorities cause us a way of life that doesn't have Christ in all, and or will it let far too life in your come to invite you fully stand together. Sing. Stand together. This moment as we talk to God, ask if there